hope you feel the need for speed. A Eurofighter with APKWS rockets just hit my newsfeed, and we need to talk about this.
I feel the need for speed.
Every now and then something pops up in defense news that sounds like a simple upgrade and turns out to be a window into a much bigger problem. BAE Systems just announced it successfully tested the Advanced Precision Kill Weapon System, or APKWS, aboard a Eurofighter Typhoon. I am smitten with the Eurofighter. It is a sexy jet, y'all. Whew, is it getting hot in here, or is it just me? Oh my stars. The pitch is elegant. Instead of firing a six-figure missile at a $20,000 Shahed, you fire a precision-guided rocket that costs a fraction of the price. Smart economics, clean solution, great press release. Here's the part the press release doesn't say, though, out loud. Putting a cheap rocket on an expensive fighter jet solves the cost problem on paper, while quietly ignoring a different problem entirely, one that the A-10 Warthog solved 40 years ago, that nobody has bothered to replace, and that drone warfare just made existential. The Eurofighter is one of the finest aircraft in the world, and in the right fight, it's terrifying. But hunting slow drones at low altitude may be exactly the wrong fight for it. And the fact that we're bolting cheap rockets onto a Mach 2 air superiority 4th generation jet tells you something important about where Western air forces actually are right now. Hey friends, Wes O'Donnell here. I am a U.S. multi-branch veteran of the U.S. Army Infantry and the U.S. Air Force, defense journalist, and while I was never a fighter pilot, I did stay at a Holiday Inn Express last night, which qualifies me to talk about Eurofighter. I did also spend years on the E3 AWACS platform watching aircraft do things that would make your optometrist nervous. So today we're talking about the Eurofighter Typhoon, the APKWS rocket, and why this clever solution to the drone problem is also an accidental confession that the West has a serious gap in its counter-UAS toolkit. First, let's establish what APKWS actually is, because it's genuinely impressive technology in its intended context. APKWS, for Advanced Precision Kill Weapon System, is a guidance kit that converts standard, unguided, 2.75-inch Hydra rockets, the Hydra 70 family, I believe, into laser-guided precision weapons. Now, the Hydra 70 has been a workhorse of American military aviation since the Vietnam era, fired from helicopters and ground attack aircraft against soft targets, light armor, and personnel. APKWS adds a mid-body laser seeker and a guidance section, transforming a dumb rocket into something that can reliably hit a small target. And the best part is the cost per round is dramatically lower than any dedicated guided missile, somewhere in the range of $10,000 per rocket, compared to hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars for an AMRAAM or a Meteor. BAE conducted the initial test as an air-to-surface engagement at its Wharton Flight Test Center in England, using a Royal Air Force Typhoon test aircraft against a ground-based target. Air-to-air testing is next, with no timeline disclosed, but the logic is straightforward. The RAF has already shot down an Iranian drone approaching Qatari territory last month using an unidentified air-to-air missile, one of the expensive ones. APKWS is the proposed answer to doing that same job without bleeding your high-end munitions inventory every time Tehran sends up a flying Mario Kart. The economics are real. We talk about that a lot on my channel. Shahed 136 drones cost an estimated $20,000 to $50,000 each. Iran, Russia, and their proxies are launching them in volume. Firing an AMRAAM worth $400,000 in each one is not air defense, it's a subsidy program for your adversary's attrition strategy. The drone economics problem isn't new, it's just scaled. Iron Dome confronted the same calculus a decade ago against rockets costing a few $100s apiece, intercepted by missiles costing $50,000. The math always favors the attacker. What's changed is that the threat has grown wings, acquired modest navigation capability, and started operating at altitudes and speeds that complicate every layer of the defensive stack. Why? Because NATO has spent years investing in stealth platforms and speed and hypersonics, when it turns out The real threat was low and slow the whole time. What also changed is that the West quietly retired most of the aircraft that were actually built to kill slow, low-flying threats cheaply. The A-10 Warthog, derided for decades as too slow, too ugly, too single-mission, turns out to have been engineered for almost exactly this problem set. It flies slow enough to visually acquire and track a drone. It carries a 30mm Gatling cannon that can destroy light aerial targets at minimal cost per round. It can operate at low altitude without the aerodynamic stress that high-performance jets endure when they throttle back to match a target that's doing 150 knots. This is likely how Ukraine has lost one or more of its F-16s by slowing them down to the point of stalling so they can shoot down Shaheds with the F-16's Gatling gun. Now, the Air Force has been trying to retire the A-10 for years. The drone war keeps handing it a new lease on life. I personally think the A-10 is the perfect vehicle for counter-drone warfare. Why put APKWS on Eurofighter or F-15s or F-16s when you have the A-10? Lots of them. Spending time on AWACS gave me a particular view of the airspace management problem. We tracked everything: fast movers, slow movers, helicopters, unknowns. The sensor picture doesn't care what the target costs, but the intercept picture absolutely does. Vectoring a Typhoon onto a Shahed at low altitude is a crew workload and aircraft performance problem that doesn't show up in the brochure. The intercept geometry for a Mach 2 aircraft against a 150-knot drone is genuinely awkward, and experienced aviators have been saying so quietly for 2 years, while the clickbait headlines from a lot of military blogs try to stay upbeat. So let's apply some structured skepticism to the APKWS on Typhoon story, because the test result and the operational reality are two different things. Okay, so the UK's air-to-surface test worked. A Typhoon fired an APKWS rocket at a ground target and hit it. That's real. The air-to-air test hasn't happened yet, and BAE won't say when. That's the more important test, and the silence around the timeline is worth noting. What we don't know is whether the Typhoon's fire control radar can reliably track and cue an engagement against a small, slow, low-flying target and cluttered ground return, and whether the Typhoon's flight envelope at the slow speeds required to prosecute a drone intercept creates handling problems that test conditions at altitude don't fully replicate. The RAF Eurofighter Typhoon that killed the Iranian drone near Qatar used an unidentified air-to-air missile, not APKWS. That engagement tells us Typhoon can kill drones. It doesn't yet tell us they can do it cheaply. So here's what makes this problem structurally difficult for any high-performance fighter, and why the Typhoon's resume actually works against it here. The Eurofighter was built to go fast, turn hard, and kill peer aircraft in contested airspace. It is extraordinarily good at those things. I've covered this jet extensively in the past. There's even a documented NATO exercise where a German Typhoon pilot got behind an F-35 and scored a simulated gun kill at Ramstein, which delighted European aviation circles considerably. The F-35 pilot's honest post-engagement comment was that in real combat, he would have never let a Typhoon get that close. He'd kill it beyond visual range before the dogfight started, which is exactly the point. The F-35 is built for one kind of fight, the Typhoon for another. Neither of them is built to patrol at 200 knots looking for slow drones. A Shahed 136 cruises at roughly 185 kilometers per hour. A Typhoon's minimum controllable airspeed in clean configuration is well above that. To prosecute an intercept, the pilot has to manage energy, altitude, and geometry against a target that is essentially flying at parade speed by fighter standards, while keeping the aircraft not stalling, maintaining radar contact on something with a small radar cross-section, and ensuring the APKWS seeker can lock before the geometry goes wrong. It can be done, it's just not what the airframe was optimized to do, and doing it repeatedly at scale with a jet that costs $90 million and requires extensive maintenance per flight hour is not a sustainable counter-drone strategy. The APKWS integration isn't really a counter-drone solution. It's a gap filler that reveals the absence of a counter-drone solution. The aircraft category that would most elegantly solve this problem is slow, durable, cheap to operate, able to carry volume fires at low altitude. See where I'm going with this? It's the light attack jet or armed turboprop. Something like the, A-10 Warthog? Or the A-29 Super Tucano, or the Textron Scorpion. Any of those platforms that can loiter, identify, and engage slow aerial threats without burning through the flight hours of aircraft that cost 10 times as much and need to be preserved for pure combat. Some of these platforms exist. None of NATO's major air forces have bought them in meaningful numbers for the mission, because for 20 years, nobody was willing to allocate procurement dollars to a slow propeller aircraft when fifth-generation fighters were all the sexy headline. Drone warfare has sent that bill to collections, and the deeper consequence is a structural one for NATO air forces. Every Typhoon, every Rafale, every F-35 sortie flown against a Shahed drone is a sortie not flown in the high-end air superiority role those jets were bought to fill. Airframe hours are finite. Maintenance cycles are finite. Pilot currency in advanced air combat maneuvering is finite. Using Mach 2 aircraft as drone hunters is a slow-motion readiness tax. Not catastrophic in any single engagement, but compounding across a sustained conflict in ways that degrade the high-end force over time. This is turning into a rant. The Iron Beam integration into layered air defense is the direction the problem is pushing every serious Air Force. APKWS on the Typhoon is a sensible interim answer, but it should not be the architecture. Okay, none of this is criticism of the test itself. BAE internally funded that work, which means no taxpayer money went toward proving the concept, and the data from the air-to-surface trial is legitimately useful. If air-to-air testing succeeds, and it will, Typhoon operators will have a cheaper tool available for low-end threats. That's worth having. The caveat is simply that one cheap rocket on an expensive jet is a patch, not a strategy. And the countries that figure out the dedicated light attack counter-UAS mission first will hold a structural advantage in the next sustained air campaign. So BAE has a Eurofighter that can fire a cheap guided rocket. Great, the test worked, air-to-air coming, and somewhere in the background, every NATO air force is quietly doing the same arithmetic. How many Shaheds can we kill before we've spent more on intercepts than the drones cost to build? And how many Typhoon hours can we afford to burn before we need those jets for a fight they were actually designed for? Well, the answer to the drone problem probably isn't a smarter missile on a faster jet. It's a slower, cheaper, more expendable aircraft, or a laser doing the dirty work so the Typhoon can save its energy for the day it meets something actually worth fighting, like a fulcrum. In the meantime, bolting a Vietnam-era rocket to a fourth-generation European fighter jet and calling it a counter-drone system tells you exactly where the gap is. The West is very good at building expensive things. The next challenge is building the right, cheap things fast enough to matter. That's it for today, my friends. If this kind of analysis is useful to you, well, hit that funky subscribe button, y'all. It's free, doesn't cost you anything, and it helps support the channel. It also helps support human creators. If you like AI, I'm not judging you. That's your thing. Get your robot freak on. I'm just saying, humans out here trying to pay their mortgage. If you want to take the next step, that's memberships at about $3 a month through YouTube memberships, or you can find my written work over at Substack. That's just wesodonnell.com, super easy. And as always, glory to Ukraine, glory to the heroes. Crimea is Ukraine. I just realized that a big chunk of my international audience, of which there are many of you, probably have no idea where that joke is from. So in the United States, there was this whole marketing campaign for Holiday Inn Express where if you stayed overnight in this hotel, it apparently made you like a lot smarter. So some rando would be going into brain surgery and they'd be like, "Are you a doctor?" And he's like, "Don't worry, I stayed at a Holiday Inn Express last night." It was funny. Okay, that's the joke.